Welcome to the For My Dogs podcast.
Yes, sir.
This podcast tries to create a space to discuss what it's like to be a man in today's world and to highlight that we cannot do it alone. As always, I'm with my dog, Tucker Fur.
Hello.
Hey, Tucker.
Hi, how's it going?
Yes, and I am Johnny Gardner. Tucker and I did not try to match, but for episode 3, we both wore World Series. His is a little more
college.
present than mine. Yeah,
College World Series.
mine's in 1991.
I wore it to try and bring some of that national championship energy to Tennessee football this year. I even got the commemorative national championship Coke bottle.
We all out. You got tired of me talking trash.
Yeah, I had to get some stuff because you had the back-to-back shirt and the coffee mug, so I had to step it up.
Yeah, I'm actually, my coffee mug is Dahlonega, Georgia, but it's still Georgia.
It is
as the locals
Georgia.
call it, Da. Yeah. And this World Series shirt, I mean, we lost in that World Series. It says, I don't even know why it's a thing, but yeah, it says Braves World Series.
Yep.
So football season is a few weeks away.
Yes, it is. I've been listening to college football podcast pretty much nonstop, and I was listening to like a SEC music playlist this morning. I'm fired up. I'm so ready for it.
Oh yeah, well the SEC media days got me going for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, and just like now's the time of year when all the record predictions and people talking about what our team's going to live up to the hype. Are they not? All that's coming out. So I've just been eating all of it up and just counting down the days until we can have some college football back.
And I think Tennessee plays in week 0 technically, right? Not week 1.
I can't remember if it is week 0.
Because I think that y'all's week 1 is with NC State, and that's Georgia's week 1. But y'all play a team before NC State, right?
Yeah, we played Chattanooga first game.
Like a scrimmage game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. All right, so let's do our top 5, who we think will end in the top 5 of the SEC, because as you and I both know, that's the best conference.
Absolutely.
Right? So we'll do the top 5. Yeah, it just means more. So we'll start, let's do 1 down, because I think it's pretty obvious who 1 is, right?
I think so.
Okay, so I'll start. Number 1 is going to be Vanderbilt. Number 1. I'm just kidding. We all know, sorry, Vandy, you only have baseball.
Yeah. They were playing in an unfinished stadium last year.
Oh, yeah.
Kudos to them. I
don't know. I just think that they just knew that they didn't have anything to lose for that.
They were playing in an unfinished stadium. They have 0 fan base, and they're getting beat by 50, and they trudged through a whole season.
The fact that they can afford a new stadium because of the money. They got some good fans for that.
Yep.
But for me, I would say it's the good old Georgia Bulldogs. We did lose a lot of guys. We lost them through the portal. We gained some guys through the portal. We lost a few coaches. And personally, I'm still not a fan of Mike Bobo. I haven't been a Mike Bobo for a long time. Even when he was
a coordinator, right?
Right. But he came back last year, and I was ticked off. We did good, but I'm just not a fan of his style.
Yeah.
However, I think we have a phenomenal QB. I wasn't on board with the QB at first. He kind of came out slower. But after watching last season and then the SEC media days, the players, when they were talking about him, they said that he's a leader of men. And so it was super cool to me that, because our last quarterback, Stetson Bennett, was like Johnny Manziel. The show's all about me. And this quarterback is more of a team player, and he shows it too. He's a phenomenal leader. Could be Georgia's Heisman. We haven't had Heisman in forever. So for me personally, Georgia's number 1.
Yeah. I'm going to have to agree with you. I just think, last year you lose the SEC championship. I still thought Georgia should have been in the top 4.
Yeah.
I think Alabama jumping them just because they won the SEC championship I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't think that.
Well, Nick Saban was leaving, and so he was trying to do one more win for him.
Yeah. So yeah, and with a 12 team playoff, like if that would have been in place last year, I think you guys
We would
would have
have
won
been
it
there.
all. You would
Yeah.
have won it all, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So
Kirby
yeah,
Smart's a dog.
I will keep Georgia at the top of the SEC until they fall off, which they haven't yet. And
Yeah.
you guys are just so loaded with talent. Like even if you lose Lad McConkey, Brock
Yeah. We
Bowers,
lost
a
our
lot
best
of
tight end.
guys, yeah, and a lot of guys on the defensive line, like you guys always find a way to reload. And there's
Right.
always someone else like that. The tight end number 4, I can't remember his name.
The transfer that we just got in from the Big Ten or the
No, no, he played last year a
oh,
little
got
bit.
you. Oh, sorry. I've
Uh,
been hearing about this new transfer that we got in. But yeah.
okay. But
But
I
yeah,
mean,
you're
the
right. Like
guy,
our second string.
yeah, the guy behind Brock was like,
Yeah.
he torched Tennessee because Brock was like hurt and in and
Mhm.
out against Tennessee. So you guys are just loaded. And so until I see some blood coming through the armor, I'm not gonna knock them off the top.
I hear you. I mean, I'm not saying that we're the best. I mean, like, I'm not saying that we're unbeatable and I see our flaws, but I still, like, I don't want to go in cocky, but I still think we're number one.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
number two, you're going to hate this. And I'm not jumping on the bandwagon here. Okay. I'm just doing just like facts alone. Here
Uh-huh.
is Texas. I think it'd be number
Mm.
two. And here's my reasons.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yep.
So the big argument for Texas not being good is they say, oh, well, they won their conference and they haven't done that forever. Well, if that was your team who won the conference, you wouldn't be saying that. You would be going hype into next season too. And
Yeah.
their record with SEC teams is they have more wins over SEC teams than SEC teams do. And they beat Georgia in 2019, back in, I think that was like the Sugar Bowl,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. That was when
So,
Sam Ellinger said we're back or Texas is back, and then
yeah.
they weren't back.
Yeah. Well, and then, but with that though, the Texas quarterback, he said, we know everybody is going to be hunting after us, and then they interviewed Carson Beck and asked him what he thinks about that. And he goes, yeah, he's right because we're the hunters. And I was like, oh, heck
Mm.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I still think that you also have an easy SEC schedule in a way. I mean, I think that the teams that they're playing, I mean, they're not playing y'all. I mean, I know they're playing Georgia,
Yeah.
but they are playing Michigan like week 2, I think.
Yeah.
So
That'll
that'll be a
be
tough game.
yeah, and that'll give us an idea of who Michigan's going to be this year coming off
Yeah,
the national championship.
yeah. So I mean, I think that their hype is valid because
Mhm.
comparatively with SEC teams, but in the past, SEC teams haven't been the best. Also, we're just now getting that good hype again.
Yep.
So this is my take. Who's your number
Yep.
two?
So my number 2, I went with Ole Miss. I think as much as I hate like every bone in my body
I
does
know.
not want Lane Kiffin to be good
I
because of
know.
what he did to Tennessee. But they had a great season last year. They're returning a lot of starters off of that team, and they went out and loaded up in the portal. They added
Hmm.
an insane amount of talent through the transfer portal, which I feel like is a smart strategy for him at Ole Miss. Because I don't think Ole Miss is a place where you can recruit with the like top programs in the FC or SEC. So I think it's very smart for them to go through the portal. Um, and I was thinking Texas until I looked at their schedule, and I'm seeing 3, potentially 4 losses on there. I mean, they play you guys
Oh yeah,
at home,
yeah.
which I think they're
Michigan.
losing that game.
Yeah.
They play Michigan, which that's a toss up just because we don't know about
Right.
these two teams yet. They play at Oklahoma, and they lost to
We
Oklahoma
lost
last
Oklahoma
year.
last year. Fair.
And then at A&M, which is that's a renewed rivalry. I think A&M is going to be fired up for that game.
Yeah.
So I think that's a tough place to win. So that's why I don't have
Yeah.
them number 2.
I
But
was
I got
going.
Ole Miss.
Yeah. I mean, I see with that. I was going more with SEC teams
Mm-hmm.
and why they're re-ranking because I think the other SEC teams they play, I think that they're like the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, yeah.
But the other ones, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think it'll be tough for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my number three, and I'm not jumping off the bandwagon yet on this team,
Mm-hmm.
is Bama.
Yep.
And my reason for that is I'm not even talking about I'm not talking about players at all. I'm only talking about coaches.
Mm-hmm.
We have Oregon, Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas, and I'm probably leaving out some coaches who like Georgia. I don't know if I said Georgia, but Georgia, who coaches have came out of there and done phenomenal. Then you
Mm-hmm.
have Washington coming in here, bringing his own staff, some of his players as well, and they had a phenomenal. Like to me personally, I think like they had the best record last year going into it, and so just coaches alone. I mean, I know a lot of players left after Saban left, but I don't think that if Saban was this like great coach, like he says he's going to be, him leaving is not going to change the atmosphere, right? If you're a good leader, you leaving shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
change the atmosphere. Like you should have people underneath you to be ready.
Yeah.
So personally, I mean, I don't think that they're going to win it all. I mean, I just say three because I really want them. I really do think that they still have a chance to make a name for themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, they're in my top five. I don't have them at three.
Right.
Um, because I mean, Jalen Milrow was good last year. I wouldn't say he was great.
Right.
Now that could all change being in Kalen DeBoer's system, new offense,
Yeah.
whatever. They had 34 or 39 players enter the portal. That's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a lot of roster
Yeah.
turnover.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
That's why I didn't really focus on the players when I like saw that.
yeah. And their schedule's pretty tough this year.
Yeah.
And that my top five is heavily factoring what their schedule looks
Oh,
like
for
and
sure.
home and away
For
and
sure.
all of that. So I I wanted to preface before we got into this. I went into this trying to be as unbiased as possible and
It's
just
hard.
looking at the schedules, looking at, taking in all the stuff I've been listening to and just coming up with an unbiased opinion. So
It's so hard though.
it is very hard. But my number three team in the SEC this year, I
Oh,
think is going to be Tennessee.
I know why you said
Now,
that before now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so you're probably thinking, of course you think that. But I will say I wasn't thinking that until like the past couple weeks.
Hmm.
Because nobody's been talking about us. Nobody's really like expecting us to do a whole lot. But I've heard, a few people just point out that similar to Carson Beck, he sat 2 years behind Bennett.
Hmm.
Nico's getting to sit last year, I think, is going to be huge for his development.
Hmm.
And so I think he has the potential to have a really great season because we have the most experienced offensive line in the SEC and one of the deepest wide receiver groups and most talented wide receiver groups that Heupel's had since Hyatt and all those guys. And
Right.
the production that those guys had, it wasn't even viewed as a deep and talented receiver group.
Hmm.
This one actually is. So I'm excited to see what the offense can do. Dylan Sampson coming back. He's a great running back. He made a ton of big plays last year. We've consistently, since Heupel's been there, rushed for almost 200 yards every single season, and that's a recipe for winning in the SEC. Uh, the way I see it shaking out, I mean, our defensive line is one of the best in the SEC. Um, and linebackers and DBs remains to be seen. I don't know how they're going to be. But looking at our schedule, I think we're taking a loss at Georgia. I don't think we're winning in Athens.
Oh yeah, it's
And
at
then
Athens.
there's three games that I think are the key like games that'll decide how our season turns out. It's Oklahoma at Oklahoma, and that's early. That's like week 3 or 4. And then we got Florida at home, but we never play good against Florida, so that game always makes me nervous. And then we have Bama at home, and I think we drop at least one of those games, but I don't see us dropping more than one, especially with two of them being at home and
Right.
Florida being what we're thinking Florida's going to be this year.
Right.
So I mean that leaves us at 10-2, and I think if you're 10-2 in the SEC, you're probably going to the college football playoff. I would
Yeah,
think
with
for
12
sure.
team for sure.
Yeah, and so outside of that, like our other games, I just don't view being. I don't see many trap games on the schedule that we could drop. Like we don't have Missouri this year. I'd probably be thinking differently if we had them on the schedule. So yeah, I mean, I'm forever the optimist, obviously, just like Ted Lasso, but
Hmm.
I truly think we can have that good of a season this year.
Well, I mean, I have y'all at number four.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, y'all won 9 games last year, 11 like the year before. I mean, you're building up and going back to your defense. I think that in the past, your defense hasn't been your most popular item, but
Mm-hmm.
your whole defensive lineman is returning. I think your secondary are some of the new guys, but your
Yeah.
defensive linemen are returning. So like there is hype. And then who's your quarterback last year? Milton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even like he carried, he was like average,
Mm-hmm.
at first. He wasn't like the best, but you didn't see, what's his name? That Chick-fil-A sauce water gun guy? Is that his name?
I have no. What are you
I'm making
talking
fun of you. You call him the Polynesian pistol. I
Oh
call him the
yeah,
Chick-fil-A sauce water gun.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so he came out at the end,
Yep.
and just with
Yeah.
his
In the
like,
bowl game.
yeah, just with his like last game, right, or his first game last of the
Yeah.
season.
Had four
I mean,
touchdowns, two
everybody
rushing,
was
two
hype over
passing.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was actually torn between Tennessee and Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ole Miss had a great season last year. They potentially could have gone to the SEC championship. I think they're a little undisciplined. Like to me, I think they beat themselves up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I took them out. But I do think there's a lot of potential for y'all. I mean, y'all are continuing to grow a team. I think that this year
Yeah.
will be good with your quarterback and your defense for sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing I really like about Heupel is he's like he doesn't just take as many talented players as he can. Like he's very particular about the culture he has set there, and like
Right.
they go out and they look for certain guys. They're not just going to take anybody. So like they added a lot of talent in the portal, not a lot, but they added like intentional talent in the portal, which I think
Yeah.
is a good strategy. And then they're still recruiting well, and they've been on fire on the recruiting trail here lately. Um, and so, yeah, I think things are looking up for Tennessee, and I would like to see them get back to having a season similar to what they did, 2 seasons ago with Hendon Hooker at the helm. And
Yeah.
I do think the Samoan slinger, the Polynesian pistol,
Chick-fil-A sauce water gun.
Nico is going to lead us there.
Yeah.
And Alabama's my team at number 4
Hmm.
because yes, Alabama still has a lot of talent on that roster,
Hmm.
left over from the Saban era. I do think DeBoer is a good coach. I just think first year in the SEC can be tough, regardless of what your caliber is. Um, I think didn't Kirby lose to Vandy in his first year?
Oh yeah, we didn't have a good season at all the
Yeah,
first year.
yeah. So I just think it's tough to start off really strong in the
That's fair.
SEC,
That's fair.
which is another reason I don't have Texas or Oklahoma in my top 5
Yeah.
because I think they're in for a rude awakening
Yeah.
coming from playing Big 12 teams every week to having to play
Hmm.
SEC caliber teams week in and week out.
Hmm.
Um, I don't see them adjusting seamlessly or easily to that. So, and then my number 5, I put Missouri. They just they have one of the best quarterback wide receiver combos in all of college football with Luther Burden and Brady Cook. They lost their running back from last year, so that may take them down a notch. But when you look at their schedule, it's really not that tough. So
I know that's
that's
one of my reasons too.
yeah, that's why I have them at 5. Is just they still have talent, and the schedule is very favorable for them.
Well, they start off with 3 non-conference game, and their first SEC game is Vandy.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. Now, when it like Missouri, it's not a rival to me, but I just like it. I did not want to put them in the top 5.
Oh
Because they're
yeah.
a team that came a few years ago into the SEC, and they were like, I mean, they were as cocky as all get out, and they did good, the first season, like going into there, and then they kind of like plummeted down there,
Hmm.
and I kind of always assumed Vandy and Missouri together,
Yeah.
and so now that Missouri is above there, but yeah, I mean, they have that, so yeah, Vandy being their first SEC team, and that's like one, two, three, four, fifth, like they're like fifth game, I think.
Hmm.
Come on, they can build it up fast, you know.
Yeah. 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 And I think their defense took a step forward last year.
Hmm.
Um,
Like
I
I think they got
just
a new DC too.
Yeah, I think so because I think the one there left and went to LSU with
Yeah,
Brian
yeah.
Kelly. Um, but yeah, I'm pumped for SEC season this year. And I think 4 out of those 5 teams are making the playoff. I don't know that 5 SEC teams will make
Right.
it in, but
Well, because Georgia plays every single one of these teams.
yeah, yep,
So like, so personally to me, like I think I don't know about Texas, just because
yeah,
I mean, I'm familiar. They did beat us last time, but
hmm
I mean, I think we'll squash Missouri. No offense, I think we'll beat Tennessee, right?
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Bama, I'm unsure about. We don't do well against Bama at all. I think it's at
hmm
Bama this year,
hmm
so like we don't do well against Bama. I think it just gets into our head. So not throwing that out of the card. But yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season to watch,
It's gonna be
for
so fun.
sure. And for us as guys, when it gets to football season, if you are a football fan, your time can be monopolized a little bit by watching football, and it's hard to make time for the habits and the stuff that you're trying to build up, so you can work towards the goals that you've set for yourself if you have goals. Um, but I will always do it every season, no
Oh,
matter
for
what.
sure. For
Always.
sure.
There's nothing better than waking up on a crisp fall morning, throwing on college game day in the background,
Hmm.
drinking a cup of coffee, and then
Hmm.
just watching nothing but football all
Oh
day.
yeah. Not
All
making
day.
any plans. The only
Oh,
plans
yeah.
I'm making are watching football somewhere.
Yeah. Either at home or with other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
So yeah, can't wait for that. But speaking of habits, we did want to use this podcast to talk about what are some of the habits and practices that we can put in our lives to make us a healthy man, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What are some of the things we can do to take steps forward in our health? And that, again, when we talk about health, it's encompassing everything, right? Like the company I previously worked at talked a lot about, had this like pyramid, and it was like mind, body, spirit. And they just talked about how all three are connected and they shouldn't be, if you have them out of whack, it's almost like a three-legged stool, right? If you don't have one of them, like that stool's not going to be super stable. And there's going to be
Right.
some things that feel off, that feel wobbly, or if one's shorter than the other two, same thing. So it's really important to have habits and practices that hit all three areas, that can increase your health in those three areas. Um, so I think we'll kind of talk through it in that way. So um, you kind of have yours broken up in that kind of format.
Yeah, I
So
got
if you want
mine.
to start, you can.
Yeah, I got mine broken down in like fitness or I guess physical, spiritual, mental.
Mhm.
For me, the my I guess headline for this is a quote I heard from a pastor, and it was a sermon about anxiety and depression. And the quote he says is that a doctor cannot just say it's medical, and a pastor cannot just say it's spiritual. I think
Mhm.
that's so good because it's both, right?
Mhm.
And reading and praying, I'll get that later on this podcast. I think that's crucial, and that's
Mhm.
not a maybe, it's a need.
Mhm.
But for me personally, how I handle, because I struggle with anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and how I struggle with anxiety is through physical fitness. So
Mhm.
I think that walking is really good, and to start, because with fitness you can't just go straight into lifting 300 pounds. You got to
Mhm.
gradual get into that. So, but however, I think that getting a deep sweat in and lifting
Mhm.
weights is so good, and
Mhm.
for multiple reasons. One, so like if you got something going on, you're stressed and you're working out, you got to be counting those reps, because if you're not counting the reps, you're either not getting enough or you're doing too much. And also same thing with sets. You got to know what set you're on as well. And the reason why I think lifting weights are good because you don't want to drop them on your toes, so you got to be focused on that. And then like yesterday, I was doing deadlifts. And if I'm doing deadlifts, I have to make sure that my form is correct. I can't be bend over too much or I'm going to like strain my back. I have to make sure that my back is straight up when I'm doing that so I'll hurt
Mhm.
myself. So, and I also have like heavy metal music on. I don't know what it's saying. I make sure it's not like demonic, but
Mhm.
I do that for like more like white noise. So I have music going. I'm having to make sure I'm counting my reps. I'm making sure I'm counting my sets, making sure I'm not dropping the weight. I'm making sure I'm having the right form. I don't have time to think about what I'm stressed about. I can't do that. If I'm thinking about what I'm stressed about, my workout's going to be bad and I'm going to hurt myself. Right. So just with all of those aspects of it, I'm able to clear my mind with that. I think guys do that a lot better than girls, clearing their mind. That's the best gift God gave us.
Mhm.
But sometimes I can't do that. So I have to go and work out with that. And I would take it even a step further is that when people have anxiety, it leads to panic attacks. And panic attacks, cause their breath like to be uncontrolled and the heart rate to go up. Well,
Mhm.
when you're working out, those two things happen. When you're working out, your breath starts breathing heavy and your heart rate starts going faster. So if you know how to control that, because you have to control that in your workout or you're going to pass out. So if you can learn how to control that in your workout, when that happens with mental health and what happens when you have a panic attack, you're able to, oh wait, this happens when I'm working out, so I know how to handle this, and I can slow my breath down, slow my heart rate down because I do that
Mhm.
when I'm working out.
Mhm.
So that's like I think working out for me, my number one thing. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I didn't really like rank these.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the first things I wrote down was yeah. And there's plenty of types of exercise. It's not that you have to lift weights. You
Oh
can
yeah, that's just me personally. Yeah.
yeah, same here. Like I prefer lifting weights, like
Yeah.
running. I
But even
would
body weight too is a good
oh
thing too.
yeah, yeah. I can't do running though. That's
So running
just
sucks. No, I hate
yeah, yeah,
running.
yeah. But I walking for me though has been one of the most life-changing habits
Mm.
um that I've done in the past, 2 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I only walk like 30 to 35 minutes a day.
Like with this
You
heat
know,
now, that's a lot.
yeah, yeah, and I don't take my phone, I don't take
Mm.
headphones.
Oh really?
I walk and I pray and I think.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And um so that's, it's overlapping a couple of the habits that we're talking
Yeah.
about, but just giving yourself space to where you're not distracted to death and
Yeah.
entertained to death and you can actually think about the stuff going on in your life, the people in your life, um, the creator of
Mm-hmm.
you and everything that you're looking at, and you can just spend time like talking with God and thinking about just what's going on. It gives you time to like process what's going on around you and like how you
Yeah.
feel about everything, and like, if something's making you really anxious or stressed out, you have time to think through it and think about how to problem solve, and you can, take that to the Lord, and it feels like a weight, lifted off when you do that. Um, so yeah, I'm not going to say much more about lifting weights and working out because I think you hit the nail on the head. But I would highly, highly recommend taking some space to walk. And if you have a family, like do it with the family. Go walk
Yeah.
with your kids. Go walk with your spouse.
Yeah.
But if it's just you, like just go walk. And it doesn't have to be like you don't have to find some trail in the woods, or
Mm-hmm.
like if you want to do that, that's perfect. But like I work on a busy highway, and there's a sidewalk that goes from the church I work at all the way down to like this shopping restaurant center village thing. So I just walk there and back, and there's noise going on, but I'm not distracted by like music or a podcast or headphones. Like I have
Yeah.
the space to think.
And there's
So yeah.
and like there's no excuse to not do that because we can binge watch a Netflix series,
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
during that, so we have time in our day. We are like I had to set a limit on my phone for social media, because I realized I was on it too much. But I mean, even with that limit, I don't need to be on that. I can be walking or I can be
Yep.
doing something, and you can just go to like Chat GPT and say, "Hey, I only have 30 minutes each day. What can I do to help me be more physically fit?"
Yep.
And like, or you can go YouTube. Like we have so many resources to figure that out that there's no excuse not to do something like that.
Yeah. Listen to these statistics. I was working on a presentation this week and came
You came
across
with
this.
facts, man.
Yeah. So the average American spends 705 hours on social media every year.
Whoa.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And the average American also spends 2,737.5 hours watching TV every year.
Mm.
So we say we don't have time to
We
do
have
these
so much
things.
time.
We have all the time in the world. We're just distracting ourselves to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there's a book I would highly recommend to anyone. It's called Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer.
I got a plug
Um,
going on.
and that's where I got those statistics from. But he was talking about like how many books you could read in a year, and it would take like a fraction of that time that we're spending on social
Oh
media
yeah.
and TV. And there's just so much good you can do if you focus on what really matters and stop letting yourself, because the reality is they're selling your attention.
Mm-hmm.
They're selling your attention. And your what you consume and what you give your attention to is who you're going to become.
Mm.
And you're not getting to choose what your attention's giving to. There's an algorithm that's choosing it for you. And so it's scary. But
Dang, that's
we
deep.
have to have habits and practices that like prevent us from giving our attention to the wrong things. We have to give our
Yeah.
attention to the right things, and that takes discipline and it takes intentionality, it takes accountability, which I know, we'll hit on that later. But
Well, and I want to pause real quick and go what you're saying is if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, the last thing you need to be on is social media or watching
yeah,
TV,
yeah,
because that's the, and I'll get to that later on. So like you definitely need to stop doing that and go work out. And I know if you're someone like listening to this right now and you're like, man, I'm depressed. And if you're depressed, you don't have motivation to do anything, right?
yeah,
A simple walk around your house, around like inside your house, doing something. Just start small habits that will create that. And if you're an anxious person, and let's say you're anxious going into work, try to like work out before work, or if you want to clear your head after work, try to like walk or work out after work. To try to help that like aspects. And because I promise you, it's gonna like with working out, you're not gonna like go in the mirror and like, oh my gosh, I am so jacked the first day, right?
yeah,
It's gonna
hmm
take time, but you need to be committed to that if you
yeah,
want to help your mental health.
yeah. Which that goes for all of these habits and
Exactly. Oh yeah,
practices we'll
right, right,
talk about. Um, but I think what's important is like, even if you don't struggle with anxiety and depression,
right.
the reality is like God has created each of us as men with a purpose
Mm-hmm.
to embody who he is, his character, and represent him to the world and to co-rule with him
Mm-hmm.
over his creation, to like take the world he created and with him just like bring it along and make it better. And in that process, like making his goodness and love and generosity evident through the way that we do that. And so regardless of if you have a like mental health issue or something, you've been created for a purpose, and it's a high calling and it's a tall task. And you can let, if the enemy can't get you to denounce your faith, he'll just distract you to death so you're not effective, so that you're not doing what you're called to or the purpose God's given you. And so, yeah, it's just as simple as like, we're not saying you got to completely cut social media out or you can
Right,
never
right,
watch TV again. I mean,
right.
we opened up talking about how much we're going to watch football this fall,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But what we're saying is like, just invest in yourself. There's no better investment than giving time to invest in you being who you're created to be and who God's called you to be. And all it takes is getting 1% better each and every day. If you get 1% better and you look at the end of the year, you're going to be blown away by how much you've grown in just a short span of time, just by a small fraction of a change in your life.
Yeah, that's
And
not a lot. 1%.
no. And so, like, we're going to talk about a lot of habits and practices today, but recognize that Johnny and I have developed these over a long period of time, and we're not always perfect at it. We don't always do all of them. Um, it's come with a lot of time and a lot of trial and error. So, like, if you're listening to this podcast and you feel like you're an undisciplined person, you're very distracted, you feel like you don't have time for anything, I would encourage you, just if one habit stands out to you, start with that. Just start with a small change, and then you can build off of that. So yeah, sorry for that
No, I love that
sidebar
because
soapbox, but
every habit that I want to say, I'm not perfect on.
mhm,
Like there's some days that I don't do them, even though I should.
mhm.
I just from you're saying, there's our experience that we know that these are the habits that we need to live a healthy life,
Yep,
like
yep,
mentally, physically, and spiritually. These are habits that we know that we need. We're not perfect on them, so don't think that we're like these experts. We just
yep.
this whole podcast is about our trial and error, and we're like, hey,
Mhm.
instead of you going through that trial and error, let's just tell you the roads
Yep,
to don't go down and the roads to do go down.
yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, getting back into some of the habits, I would say, like, I feel like a lot of men, especially young men, and this was me for a long time, are just like coasting through life, letting life come to them. There's not a whole lot of intentionality or forethought or um, thinking about who you want to become 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We just kind of go with the flow. And one of my favorite quotes used to be when Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean does this crazy like getaway escape thing, and they're like, "Do you think he like plans all this stuff out, or just makes it up as he goes along?" And for the longest time, that's how I lived my life. Like I was just making it up as I went along.
Right.
And I know different personalities. Like there's people that are more planners, and then there's not. So like I'm on the side that's not. But my point is one of my habits and practices that I think you should do is first you need to get clear on what your purpose is, what you feel like you're on this earth for. Like, why are you here? Ask that question. And you may not get an answer right away. That may be a long process for you to figure that out. And you look into like, all right, what are the things I enjoy most? What are the things I think I'm good at? Um, what are the experiences I've had, and what have I learned from those? And I could go into more about that, but then figure out what your passion is. Like, what is it that motivates you to get out of bed every day? Is it people in your life? Is it the work that you're doing, or like the specific tasks of your day to day that motivate you and get you out of bed? Is it the purpose behind what you're doing? Is it like you're doing something for a greater cause, and like that's what gets you out of bed in the morning? Or is it that you just want to be the best? Is that what drives you? That you want to be the best? And if you can figure that out, that also helps a ton. And then if you get really clear on what's important to you, like what are your values? What do you value the most? Rank those, and that'll tell you where you need to spend your time. Once you get those three things, clear, and you can communicate it, then you can start to really map out how you want to spend your time, and you can get your priorities straight. And then following that, once you get those things in place, I think another habit that's very important is goal setting. So often we just go out there and we're just like just chipping away at the grindstone every day, and we don't think forward of like where we want to go. Um, and you and I did this practice not that long ago, where we wrote out our obituary, right? Thinking
Yeah,
about
it's
like,
dark.
what do we want to be remembered for? What a At the end of our life, what do we want people to say about us? And it helps you, it gives you a trajectory. So then you can set smaller goals on the way there that help get you there. Um, so those are big ones for me. I would say that's more on like the mind part of things, like getting your mind right. Um, and that helps tremendously with mental health too, because a lot of times with depression, you just feel like you're not working towards anything, or you're not motivated. It's hard for you to do tasks. So if you can work on some of those things, that can really help. And that was
Yeah.
my experience. That was my experience.
No,
Like
I think it's yeah, great.
when I was dealing with depression, getting clear on those things helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
tremendously.
Well, and I think like, and not to be sexist by any means, but I think that's just how guys operate. Like
Mm-hmm.
when we hang out with our wives, like as like the like four of us, Tucker and I are just like, all right, let's just go along with the flow, and the girls have
Yep.
a list of every single
Yep.
thing that we're going to do, and it's helpful because we do need that, at some points. However, just because that's how guys are does not mean that's how guys need to stay.
Yep.
So like for me, like when I'm at work and I get stressed by the overwhelming stuff at work,
Mm-hmm.
having goals and tasks, okay, like I mean you can just like small goals, like goals for the day, like I want to get
Mm-hmm.
this accomplished today so I can like mark it off, check it off.
Yep.
I mean that will
It's
just
huge.
start taking down my anxiety and stress. But then yeah, with the obituary thing, I was so creeped out by when you wanted to do that. I was like, heck no. And I think I even told Claire, and Claire was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But when I actually did it, I was like, okay, wow, no, like this shows like what I want, what I think is most important without even me thinking that, just
Yeah.
right here, like you unconsciously think about what's the most important thing in your life.
Yep.
And then all these small things, you're like, okay, well, I don't need to be stressing. I don't need to be worrying. I don't need to be focusing on these tasks if this is not what I want my end goal to be.
Yep.
But you need to have like long term and short terms. That's why like you need to have
Yep.
day to day goals, long term goals, year goals, 5 year goals. Like, and it sounds like a lot, but it is so helpful, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gives you direction if you feel like you don't have direction, and it
Yep.
also will can help if you set realistic expectations on these goals, it can help with your anxiety. Now, if you set unrealistic, then you're going to go to spiral, but
Yep.
realistic expectations on these goals.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, with the whole purpose, passion, and values thing,
Hmm.
like, I also want to say those can change too in different seasons of life.
Right.
Like, you could think your passion is one thing because you're in this season of life. And then later on, you could be like, well, I actually think the why behind what I do motivates me more than the
Right.
people that are involved in what I do. So it just, it's good to revisit these things often too. It's not like a
Right.
one and done
That's a good point.
type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And for me, I think for like a why for me, because like Tucker and I are both believers. So I have small whys, like I want to be a good husband, declare, I want to be a good teacher, I want to help the students out. But my above all why is because of the Lord. And so my foundation is reading and praying for me. And I think that a lot of people would say that they have a really good prayer life. But if we're honest, we don't read the Bible as much as we should. And if like Tucker and I went to go hang out and I talked the entire time and Tucker never talked once, there's no conversation. There's not a relationship there. Right. But that's how we sometimes treat the Lord is that we talk and talk and talk, but we never listen. And one way that he talks back to us is through his word. And so that's one way to help out with our spiritual health is not just praying. Like, yes, we live in the South, so we pray for every meal. Christians or not Christians, they do that, right?
mhm.
But we also need to read the Bible and take time and be disciplined with that and reading the Bible. And I can take that from personal experience. Like a month ago or something, I was stressed out about a certain topic. Tucker's first question he asked was, "What are you reading?" He didn't ask if I was reading. He asked, "What are you reading?" And I've been a Christian for a long time. I could have easily said, "I'm reading James and I'm learning how to deal with sin." You know, but I told him, I said, "Honestly, man, I'm not. I'm not reading at all." And he said, "All right, well, I'll text you tomorrow to make sure. Let's read." And he did. And I'll get to accountability partners later on in this podcast. But I'm saying that to say is how Tucker knew the importance. The foundation is reading, right? That's where it all comes back to that because I need to get to the source of that. So that's why I think reading is one of the biggest foundations for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those both of those things are on my list as well.
Yeah.
And I think, even if let's say you're listening to this podcast, you're not from the South, you're not a Christian, but you
Right.
listen to this because, you like the topic of manhood, being there for each other. I'll just say like whether you're a Christian or not, I think reading the Bible is extremely beneficial for you. Um, Jesus is one of the few historical figures that like almost all world religions recognize as a positive person in history. Now they disagree about a lot of other things, but
Yeah, they don't disagree. Like, they definitely disagree with him, but they see him as a
yeah,
positive teacher.
but a lot of like what people are hoping for in humanity and hoping for in the world, we see in Jesus. Um, and so, you know, even if you're out there and you're maybe you're not spiritual at all, or maybe you're, you know, in a different religion, and I still think reading the Bible can be beneficial. Um, and really I think prayer, God works in all of us when we take time to just slow down and think. And too often we're robbing ourselves of that time. And so, um, yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, obviously Johnny and I are Christians, but I think these habits still apply even if you're not. And I still think they can help you become a healthier man. Um, but yeah, that was on my list too. And I also think, you know, there's one habit too that I think would fit into the spiritual category, although it could just be mental too. But for me, it's spiritual, and that's gratitude.
Mm.
I had no idea how important gratitude was until I found myself struggling with depression. Um, but man, taking time every day to think about what's good in my life. What is there that I can be thankful for? What are the positives? What's going right? That can be just a game changer in helping you shift your mindset from thinking everything's going wrong, thinking
Right.
always being down all the time. Like just a simple habit of writing every morning, get out a journal, write down three things that you're grateful for every morning. And like take time to think about them too. Like try and like visualize what it is you're saying you're thankful for. And it'll change your whole day. It will. And gratitude will also build up this resilience in you to where when things go wrong or things that normally would stress you out or make you sad or make you angry, like gratitude can like build you up and give you thicker skin to where those things don't impact and penetrate you and hurt you as much. Because it helps you focus on the silver lining, like what's going right, what's good. And I just think that's a crucial habit.
No, I think that is spiritual too, right? Because if it, like, as a Christian, you're going to be thankful for the Lord, thankful for salvation, thankful for Him giving breath into your lungs. And there are so many verses about gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in Ephesians, it talks about the word being a sword, right? And and the armor of God is comparing to the Roman soldiers' armor. So the sword. So the Roman soldiers, they knew how to use their sword. They had it memorized on their skills on how they can use it to attack their opponent, right? They had it drilled into their brain how to use it, what it was, and the reason why it's called a sword is because we need the word during times of our lives, like battles. So we can need to memorize this word. So when you're struggling with depression, maybe memorize it. Like you can like think about things you're thankful for, which I think is a really good tactic because you know, if you're driving and you look at a car accident, you're gonna start drifting towards it, right? So you need to start looking at things like that you're thankful for, so you can either write things down you're thankful for or memorize scripture that you're thankful for. If you have anxiety, you can start memorizing scripture to help fight against that so that when that time happens, you can just repeat that in your head. Because it's a sword. Like it's not just going to be a cliche thing you're saying. Like it is a weapon that you can use and the fight off temptation, to fight off anxiety, to fight off depression. So I highly recommend writing things down and even go a step further of memorizing scripture during that time as well.
No. Yeah. There's another cool practice I learned about where it just helps with your mental toughness of um, the reality is, biologically speaking, 80% of our thoughts are negative, and it's tied to, our ancestors were living in a survivor, hunter gatherer, mode. So their brains were always like looking out for
Right.
the threats and assessing the threats. So our brains, that's carried on even though we don't live in that world anymore. Like,
Mhm.
we're not worried about a saber-toothed tiger jumping out of some tall grass and mauling us to death, right?
Right.
Some parts of the world, they still are in that, but in America, we're not in that. And so we have to learn and kind of like retrain our brain to not always be thinking of the negative or looking out for the threat. And that's a lot of what anxiety is it is your mind is like preparing you for all that may go wrong, and then it causes this like stress and like you feeling like, oh gosh, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, but in reality it's just like pictures of what could go wrong flashing in front of your mind. So one of the things I found helpful that you can do if you find yourself doing that often is like, you have a negative thought, write it down. Like, if you have a thought of I'm not good enough, write it down, and then think of what the positive of that would be. Like, what do you want instead? Okay, so if I'm thinking I'm not good enough, I want to think I am good enough. Like, I am I am power, or whatever the opposite to that would be. You write that under it, and then you mark out the top negative thought. And this is something you can do in a journal and track it, for a week or so, and you'll start to like see your mind just doing it automatically. Like, it'll become a habit to where you're reversing these negative thoughts with what you want instead.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that. My old boss, he used to joke. It was a joke, but I mean, it was a little serious. He always told me that I was always so negative, and I told him, I said, "Well, it's good being negative because I said our ancestors. I said someone who is so positive all the time, if they were in like the Stone Age and walked through that tall grass, they're gonna get killed by a saber-toothed tiger or a snake. But
yeah,
someone who's negative is going to think maybe I should go around it at first. So being negative helps you survive. That was a way that I like would just say it was okay for being a. But no, you're like
yeah,
you're so right. Like if you keep focusing on that, that's who you're going to become.
yeah,
Right? And I like that visual aspect of no, that's not who I am. This is who I am instead.
yeah.
Right. So
And
what you focus on is who you're going to become.
and again, this is where scripture can be so helpful, right? Because sometimes we think things about ourselves that God clearly says in scripture, like, this is not who you are.
Right.
Like, if you think I don't have a purpose here, or like I don't belong here, well,
Right.
God clearly has told you that He's created you for a purpose, and it's like it's a legit like honoring purpose. Like, it's you've been called to
Amen.
something great.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times scripture can help with that. Or like, if you think like, if you're super insecure about the way you look, like, well, God's told you you're fearfully and wonderfully made,
Mhm.
and like you've been created in His image. That's some dignity to that. And so, yeah, it's a great thing. And I don't. Did you see Inside Out too?
I've not. Only heard good things about it though.
Yeah, I highly recommend it because they introduced anxiety in this one, and
Right.
it just helps you understand that like anxiety has a role to play, but it too often anxiety controls who we are,
Oh, for
who
sure.
or who we're supposed to be, and that's not its place. And so we have to learn to train our brains to put anxiety and those negative thoughts in its place,
Mhm.
um, and let it do the good things, but also realize that it's not supposed to run the show.
Yeah.
And too often we let it do that. So yeah, that there's a plug for Inside Out too.
You're just
Um,
doing a ton of plugs today, man.
yeah, just giving the people what they want, the
I hear you.
resources they want.
I hear you.
Yeah, so I think, along with a lot of what we talked about, one key one key habit that I'm trying to get better at and trying to get more structure to in my life is taking time to rest. Um,
I'm so bad at that.
yeah, yeah, and I am too. And I don't mean just like having a lazy day where you watch TV or
No,
you know play
because there is
video
an excessive
games.
amount of rest too. That's
Right,
unhealthy.
right. I think so. what I base my rest off of is a biblical practice called Sabbath. Um, so the Hebrews, Israelites in the Old Testament, they had this practice of Sabbath, and it was a 24-hour period once a week where they would cease from work, they would worship God, and just delight in who He is and in His creation. And so there was all these feasts tied to it, and they would go to the temple together, and they would eat meals together, and um, you know, our world used to be back in like the 50s and 60s. America actually functioned with like a underlying, we're going to have a Sabbath. Like everything was closed on Sunday. You couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't get anything, you had to do all that ahead of time. And that was the same for the Israelites. Like they had to prepare everything so that they could have 24 hours of rest where they weren't working and weren't doing anything. And then just as our world is just hungry for more and more money and more productivity, we've moved away from that. And so now most companies or most like restaurants you think of or grocery stores, they're open 7 days of the week, long hours. And so we just kind of lost it being embedded. And so it's harder to do these days. And I've been bad about setting aside time for that. Now, obviously, I have, I take Friday and Saturday as my days off because I work. Sunday's a work day for me. Um, but I still find myself just filling those days with like doing other stuff or like,
Right.
so I'm trying to get more intentional about just making Haley and I both just having a 24-hour period where we slow down and we use that day to worship, to delight in who God is, to enjoy His creation, um, and to rest, just to cease from work, knowing that like none of my doing and trying is like that stuff will all be there when I go back to work. And God is faithful to provide and meet us, and He's given us everything we need. We don't need to constantly be striving and working to get more because in God we have enough. In Jesus we have enough. And so I'm trying to do a better job of that. And that helps tremendously with not feeling overwhelmed, with not feeling burnt out. If you can have that as a practice, like an intentional habit, um, you'll find yourself not doing that. And if you're like way up in a company, you're a CEO or a manager of a bunch of people, I'm sure you feel the weight of like just feeling like you always have to be checking emails, you always got to be on the phone, you always got to be working, but like just hear that it's okay. All those things, like just trust the Lord with those things. They're not all on your shoulders. Um, I think that's a key part of rest.
No, I saw this video that said at the end of the month, if you die at the end of the month, they will replace you at your job.
Yep.
And so you need to be working on your obituary more than your resume.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, gosh, that's so good. Now, Tucker and I are not saying be a slacker at work. You still need to
Yeah.
perform at
Yeah.
work.
Mm-hmm.
However, don't let it consume you in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I struggle with rest so much. And like for me, and you're about to roll your eyes when you hear this because I'm sure you've heard this so many times. And if anyone has ever like had a serious conversation with me, I love to throw this analogy in. And I'm an analogy guy, if you don't know already.
Mm-hmm.
But the analogy of the two wolves is my favorite story. See, there it is.
Yeah.
I tell it so many times because there's a good wolf and a bad wolf. The good wolf, or sorry, let's start with the bad wolf. The bad wolf is filled with depression, anxiety, drunkenness, lust, addiction, and or angerness. The good wolf is filled with joy, peace, patience, kindness, and self-control. And the question you ask is, which wolf wins? And people will go back and forth, and the answer is the wolf you feed is the wolf that wins. And every day, these wolves are going to be hungry. So, like for me personally, if I'm giving like even some music, if I'm listening to like I love rap, country, rock and roll, punk rock, heavy metal, but sometimes that stuff can have a negative effect on me. and it can have I have to take a break from that, you know.
Mhm.
So if I'm putting in bad stuff from there and I'm feeding that bad wolf, then that bad wolf is going to be stronger, and the good wolf will have no food, and he's going to lose, right? So I'm not saying don't listen to rap, don't listen to country, but I'm saying like, do it at certain levels
Yeah.
because you don't want it to consume you. You don't want to feed so much, and where then the good wolf is weak. And the way you feed the good wolf is through reading the Bible. It's through these habits right here.
Uh-huh.
So you gotta feed each wolf. And every morning they're gonna be coming to you, and you gotta decide which dog bowl you're gonna put into that day. And every day it's a constant fight every day of which one you're going to do for
Mhm.
it in. And another way to feed that good wolf for me personally is with accountability partners and counselors. I think these two aspects get the worst rap ever, because for a counselor, I think people say, I don't need a counselor yet. My life isn't that bad. Well, to do a full circle right now is, let's say, the Georgia and Tennessee game. Georgia is not going to start having new plays in the middle of that game. They're not going to start practicing, new different skills in the middle of that game. They're practicing right now for that game in the fall. And that sounds common sense. Why would they make up new plays in the middle of that game? Why would they practice in the middle of that game? Sounds common sense. But we don't think it's common sense when it comes to counseling. We don't think that we think that we should wait until it gets bad and then start doing something about it. Right? If Georgia was losing, like it would never happen. But if Georgia was losing like 40 points to Tennessee, they're not going to start doing a new play that they've never done before, because it's not going to get the best results for them. So with counseling is you're not going to like it's not going to help you if you start counseling in the middle of it. Now, trust me, there are great counselors out there, and it will take time, and I believe in it. But you can prepare for that before that happens. Now, just because your life is going great does not mean that you don't need counseling. Does not mean that you don't need accountability in your life. Going back to the good wolf and bad wolf, because I think that mental health is not this linear thing where you go from point A and go all the way to point B. I think it has ups and downs to it, and I'm not saying to camp out in those valleys, right? Because you're going to have times where you're going to have maybe a panic attack, or you might get depressed again right now. But that's why you need those counselors and those accountability partners in your life. That when those valleys happen, you have someone to help you bring you back up.
Uh-huh.
And like they're like, it is something that even people who struggle with mental health still don't think that they need that. But
Mhm.
that is one of the biggest things that people need in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And with a lot of the habits we've talked today about, you need other people in those, like
Yeah.
help you determine what your purpose is, what your passion is. Like you need to talk to other people and see what they see in you.
Right.
And because you may have blind spots, you may have things that you don't notice about yourself. So yeah, counseling is a great thing to do, and I'm glad that it doesn't have the stigma that it used to have anymore.
Right.
And it's becoming, people are starting to see the value in it, so that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we said earlier, hopefully this is helpful and just gives you an idea of some things you can start doing if you're not doing them already. And again, if none of these are a part of your habits or practices, like just start with something small. Start with one easy win. It could be the gratitude thing where you're writing
Yeah.
down 3 things you're thankful for.
Definitely start
Um,
small.
yeah, and just it'll give you the momentum you need to build off of that and add some more on as you go. Um, but yeah, that wraps up the podcast for today. So you guys have our top 5 SEC predictions for the year, so you can hold us accountable for that once the season gets going. And we hope that you're out there spending the time making yourself a better man and doing that, and holding each other accountable for that as well. So go be a dog today.
And go be there for your dogs.